gave her time violation once. How is this fair? No, you're calling the score after the point is over. It's not like we're playing 1 point. You're calling the score like 6 seconds after the point is over.
Yeah, she's 100% right.
During Coco Gauff's 2023 U.S. Open first-round match, a WTA official accused her of playing too quickly while Laura Siegemund, her opponent, continued to let the shot clock run to zero without being penalized. One of the most contentious officiating incidents in recent tennis history began when Coco approached the umpire and wanted to know how this was fair. Even the audience went against the umpire because of how blatantly biased she was, yet she quickly felt regret. Do you believe the umpire was incompetent, dishonest, or simply in the heat of the moment? The specifics make this scenario more worse than it first appears. So let's start with what actually transpired.
Like we're having 30-ball rallies. It's 2 balls. He's going to. I'm going a normal speed. Ask any ref here. I go a medium pace speed. But she can't. It's every single point.
In the opening round of the 2023 U.S. Open, Coco Gauff faced Laura Siegemund. This took place in New York, where the American star was being supported by a sizable crowd. Coco was the clear favorite to win both the game and possibly the tournament as a whole. However, things were not going as planned. Laura Siegemund was using every tactic in the book to slow down the match as she was down a set. There is a purpose behind the shot clock in tennis. In between points, players have 25 seconds to serve. The rule is that its purpose is to deter players from delaying and to keep games moving. Laura Siegemund repeatedly allowed the clock to drop to zero, according to Coco's count 4 times. Additionally, Mariana Velovic, the umpire, awarded her a single infraction.
Okay, well said. As if she didn't have the crowd on her side enough.
Well, she spoke her piece.
Coco Gauff, meanwhile, was serving at what she called a medium tempo and normal speed. She wasn't in a hurry. She wasn't attempting to surprise her opponent. All she was doing was playing tennis at a decent pace. Laura Siegemund later complained that Coco was serving incredibly quickly, almost ridiculously quickly, and that somehow created a problem for her. Take a moment to consider that. While frequently breaking the shot clock received a pass from the umpire, playing at a reasonable pace became grounds for complaint. It's not officiating. Favoritism is that. That is either corruption or incompetence. Additionally, neither choice enhances the umpire's reputation. In the last set, Coco had had enough. She approached the chair and faced Mariana Velovic head-on. About 4 times, she went over the clock. You once gave her a time violation. How equitable is this? Coco remarked. I'm moving at my usual pace. I move at a moderate speed. It's not a tantrum. The official is not being disrespected by it. The question of why the regulations are being implemented differently is a valid one. Coco wasn't requesting preferential treatment. She was requesting that both players be subject to the same regulations. You can tell how badly this match was officiated by the fact that she had to specifically request that. Later in the game, the umpire finally intervened and awarded Laura Siegemund a point penalty for another time violation. Coco led the decisive set 5-1 after that penalty. And you know what came next? Laura Siegemund approached the umpire and voiced her displeasure about Coco serving too quickly. She's serving extremely fast, almost unreasonably fast, and I'm always here, and one time I go to the towel, Siegemund stated. She therefore argues that it is unfair for Coco to play at a normal pace. However, since she had to go to the towel, breaking the shot clock repeatedly is completely acceptable.
Rules don't operate that way.
None of this operates in that manner. It is astounding that the umpire even considered this objection. Serving quickly is not prohibited. You only need to give your opponent enough time to position themselves. You do not need to wait for them to feel prepared. The purpose of the shot clock is to stop Siegemund from stalling in this manner. However, Rather than C breaching the rules, Coco's adherence to them became the source of contention. After that point penalty, Soane recovered and reduced the set to 5-4, which must have unnerved Coco. At her home slam, she was just one game away from a humiliating first-round elimination. However, she maintained her composure, won the match, and served out the set. At the age of just 19, she won her first Grand Slam title after going on to win the entire event. But this is what's so frustrating about the whole thing. Due to an umpire's inability or unwillingness to fairly follow the rules, Coco nearly lost the US Open title. Coco's entire career path would have changed if she had lost that match because she became upset over the unfair officiating. No US Open championship, no boost of confidence from a slam victory, and no future momentum. All because an umpire determined that the other player's entirely lawful playing tempo was more significant than one player's flagrant rule infractions. Mariana Velovic has a terrible record in this match, so let's take a moment to discuss her. After allowing the clock to reach zero at least 4 times, she issued Laura Siegemund a one-time infraction. That represents a clear, objective regulation with a 25% enforcement rate. Either the shot clock reached zero, or it didn't. This is not a judgment call. Everyone can see it directly on the screen. However, Velovic didn't do anything significant until Coco challenged her. She seems hesitant even then. Given the number of infractions that had already taken place, the point penalty that was eventually imposed was long overdue. That is not a sign of incapacity. That is deciding not to enforce the regulations until you are compelled to do so by public pressure. During this game, the audience was wholly in favor of Coco. Siegemund's stalling strategies were being jeered by them. They were endorsing Coco's grievances against the umpire. Despite the chairperson's refusal to admit it, they knew what was going on. Additionally, the umpire's decision to act was likely influenced by the backing of the audience, as it is not a good image for anyone attempting to preserve authority to appear biased in front of an antagonistic crowd. However, Laura Siegemund doesn't come out of this looking well either, so let's also discuss her actions. She had the nerve to gripe about the crowd's treatment of her after the game. She claimed that they treated her badly, disrespectfully, and like a cheater. She asserted that she maintained her composure during the entire game and never did anything to offend the crowd. However, she did act in a way that was worthy of the crowd's animosity. She broke the shot clock several times. She disrupted Coco's rhythm by using every stalling technique at her disposal. As if it were unfair, she bemoaned the fact that her opponent was playing at a typical pace. Someone isn't acting in a fair and square manner by doing those things. These are the behaviors of someone who is trying to obtain an unfair advantage through gamesmanship, and then to turn around and pretend to be the victim about the response of the crowd. That's wealthy. Because of the way she played the game, the fans treated her just as she deserved to be received. Don't consistently violate the rules if you don't want to be perceived as a cheater. Don't waste time in a way that is visible to everyone in the stadium if you don't want to be jeered. Siegemund claimed that she never yelled at the audience, hurled rackets, or made offensive gestures. Excellent. That is the bare minimum of appropriate conduct in a professional setting. This does not imply that you get away with disobeying the rules for the duration of a game. Her behavior didn't bother the audience. They had good reason to be angry about her strategies. After the game, Coco said that she dislikes conflict and wasn't sure if it was appropriate to speak up until it happened several times. That demonstrates amazing self-control. In actuality, the majority of players would have detonated far sooner. However, Coco maintained her composure, made a cogent argument to the umpire, and let the facts do the talking. She was right to speak up, as evidenced by the umpire's eventual enforcement of the regulations. Coco has experienced officiating problems before. She sobbed during a 2024 French Open semi-final defeat due to a wrong ruling on one of her points. She demanded a rule change after a loss at the Olympics after another incorrect call. This pattern of Coco being mistreated by officials at pivotal times is beginning to look less like a coincidence and more like a structural issue with the way tennis officiating operates. But going back to the US Open match, Mariana Velovic must have felt a great deal of regret right away. One of the tournament's most contentious bouts was overseen by her. Her application of the shot clock regulations was blatantly biased or inept. Because the umpire refused to perform her duties, she caused a rising American star to nearly lose in the first round at home. In hindsight, the umpire's subpar officiating became even more apparent when Coco went on to win the entire competition. Imagine being Mariana Velović and witnessing Coco hoist the US Open trophy while knowing that you nearly stopped it from happening. Realizing that an outstanding professional moment may have been ruined by your failure to implement simple standards. That must hurt. That's what sudden remorse is all about. As is customary, the WTA never discusses this officiating disagreement in public. Tennis organizations are infamous for their inability to hold officials responsible for errors. Players will be targeted for verbal outbursts or racket smashes. However, there are seldom any repercussions for umpires who make bad calls or apply the rules inconsistently. Because there is no motivation to improve, this fosters a culture where poor officiating persists. The Laura Siegemans incident also draws attention to a more general tennis issue. Time wasting and gamesmanship are acceptable aspects of the sport that shouldn't be. Umpires allow players to frequently use towels, take injury timeouts, and stall between points since confronting them causes controversy. For players who simply wish to play tennis at a regular tempo, however, this produces an unfair playing condition. Playing Coco Gauff at a moderate pace shouldn't be contentious. It ought to be the norm. The fact that it started to cause complaints demonstrates how outdated tennis culture has become when it comes to play speed. This issue was meant to be resolved by the shot clock. It was intended to remove the subjectivity associated with time breaches. However, the time is useless if umpires don't apply it consistently. This game's crowd reaction was noteworthy because it demonstrated that even when authorities don't comprehend fairness, people do. They could see what was taking place. Siegemans was stalling, as they could see. They witnessed the umpire disregarding it. Additionally, they expressed their emotions. Coco's tournament was likely rescued by the audience pressure, which compelled the umpire to act at last. But in order to have fair officiating, players shouldn't have to rely on audience support. Regardless of the players or the location of the game, the rules should be applied uniformly. For any professional sport, that is the fundamental expectation. Tennis frequently fails at this level, and the opening round of the 2023 US Open is a prime illustration. Coco's mental toughness is demonstrated by the fact that she won the event in spite of this officiating blunder. After the initial round of criticism, the majority of 19-year-olds would have crumbled. Most players would be broken by the combination of losing a set, arguing with the umpire, and dealing with an opponent who uses every stalling strategy imaginable. However, Coco rallied, prevailed in that game, and went on to win 6-2 in the championship. Coco became a real star after winning the US Open. It wasn't an anomaly. 7 rounds of excellent tennis played under extreme pressure were required to earn it. But because an umpire couldn't enforce fundamental rules, it almost didn't happen. And anyone who values fair competition should be troubled by that. This match probably doesn't cause Mariana Velović to lose sleep. Since they must go on to the next competition, most referees don't focus on their errors. However, she ought to consider it. She ought to consider how close she was to ruining one of the greatest tales in modern tennis history. She ought to consider why it took her so long to implement a clear, objective regulation. Additionally, she needs to consider how her officiating appeared to the millions of viewers worldwide. The immediate regret ought to last forever. Not only for this game, but also as a reminder that fair rule enforcement, officiating, and treating participants equally under the rules are important. During Coco Gauff's opening round match at the 2023 US Open, Mariana Velović failed at each of those things. Furthermore, Coco's victory in the tournament does not justify that failing. One of the most biased officiating incidents in recent tennis history occurred when an umpire allowed Laura Siegemans to break the shot clock 4 times while punishing Coco Gauff for playing at a reasonable pace. Before the umpire began to do her duties, Coco had to physically approach the chair and demand fair treatment. When Coco won the entire competition and the umpire nearly ruined a memorable moment, the immediate regret was intense. For more analyses of officiating mishaps that nearly altered sports, hit like and subscribe.